The Galactic Dravari Empire had crushed 57 rebellions in the last century. None lasted more than a week. None ended without mass executions. It was a known formula. Identify the loudest voices, silence them, and publicly broadcast the silence of the rest. The Empire was efficient, brutal, and absolutely convinced of its superiority. For centuries, it had treated humanity as a tolerable nuisance, barely worth suppressing. Death worlders, yes, but pacified ones. A few generations of peace, integration, and demilitarization had turned Earthborn colonists into docile citizens. Or so they believed. Faceless 9 was a sleepy mid-tier colony known more for its mineral logistics than political instability. The unrest began when the planetary governor was assassinated by an unknown assailant. One shot to the head, no witnesses, no trace. That was enough. Martial law was declared. Hundreds were arrested. 5 human women were among them, though no official charges were made for weeks. Their names were not released, but rumors spread quickly. Whispers among the slaves and technicians said these women were different, calm, unshaken, and uncooperative. The Dravari commander, Lord Calzine, needed a spectacle. The stability of his sector depended on visible dominance. When it became known that these 5 women were all married to former human soldiers, the decision was obvious. The execution would be public. It would be ritualistic. It would be broadcast across 12 systems. The message would be simple. Human resistance ends in flame. Their identities were leaked 2 days before the broadcast. Dr. Elira Vance, xenobiologist and terraformation consultant. Mara Chun, primary educator for Faceless 9 Civilian School. Lila Reyes, chief structural engineer for Planetary Orbit Works. Tala Mukherjee, lead communication relay operator. Nina Barrett, artist and cultural liaison. Their profession seemed benign, even soft, but the Dravari operatives who interrogated them disagreed. One described Elira's expression as unervingly clinical. Another reported Mara silently staring at a wall for 8 hours without blinking more than 10 times. They weren't frightened. They were waiting. The women were chained to 5 plasma pylons in the center of the Faceless 9 Capitol Square. Dozens of cameras floated overhead. The crowd of force attendees, a mix of colonists, traders, and conquered species, watched in sickening silence. No resistance. No rescue. Nothing. Then, at 1400 Galactic Standard Time, the broadcast signal flickered. To the galactic audience, it was a momentary static distortion, less than 2 seconds. The footage resumed and the pylons were active, glowing red with lethal heat, and empty. The women were gone. Calzine insisted they had been vaporized. The execution had succeeded. The Empire spread that version aggressively. Most believed it. A few did not. 2 hours later, 5 men went missing, each on a separate world, each vanishing without a trace. No logs, no shuttles, no AI alerts. They simply weren't there anymore. The disappearances were not linked to the execution. At the time, Gabriel Vance's disappearance was noted by the military police on Arden Station, where he worked as a docking supervisor. His access codes were deactivated 20 minutes after the women's execution. His quarters were found spotless. Not even DNA remained on the bedsheets. Darius Chun had been working as a demolition consultant for asteroid mining in the Brel 9 system. He had declined military reactivation multiple times. When his supervisor came to check on a missed safety report, Darius's pressure suit was on its stand, boots aligned, locker empty. His ID tag was embedded in a piece of C-grade or on the floor. Elias Reyes was a ship maintenance contractor station on a civilian dry dock above Soldar Prime. He was last seen heading toward the derelict hangars, where salvage fighters were kept. An hour later, a fire control system triggered in Base 7. When the droids investigated, they found nothing but silence and the smell of ozone. Arjun Mukherjee's apartment in the megalith. 3 Arcology was found sealed from the inside. His work as a cybernetics technician had earned him favor with the locals. His interface gloves were still humming with warmth. His terminal was dead, neither fried nor hacked, but wiped, thoroughly, at a depth few understood. Eric Barrett was last seen having tea in a public square with an old woman. Surveillance records from 3 separate angles went black for 12 seconds. When the systems recovered, both were gone. The chair he had been sitting in still held the shape of his weight. At first, no one made connection. Human colonies rarely cooperated, let alone coordinated across light years. But then anomalies started stacking. A weapons research facility in the Kyrix sector detonated in a vacuum-locked implosion. It left no debris, no radiation, and no trace of containment breach. Only the exact core had vanished, leaving the surrounding mountain untouched. A planetary governor known for cruelty to human settlers vanished mid-broadcast during a victory speech. His guards' cranial implants all failed simultaneously. The last recording from his personal AI showed static, then silence. The Dravari fleet docked at Veshtal attempted to run a diagnostic on their hyperspace relay. The diagnostic triggered a cascade of feedback loops. By the time the engineers realized what was happening, 5 capital ships had mis-jumped into uncharted gravitational anomalies. Thousands dead, no survivors. The Empire's Internal Intelligence Division began investigating. They came across blacklisted tags from an old Earth-era war file. Redacted tags. No names, just call signs. Whisper, Warden, Pulse, Nomad, Spectre. Files that had been locked for 200 years. Locked by Terran Command. The Empire demanded access. Earth replied with a single message. We don't know them anymore. We hope we never do again. Unrest began growing in colonies that had always been quiet. On Threx 12, the word Barrett was spray-painted on an Imperial garrison wall. On Chorus Reach, children began carving W into stone. On Kilomrin, 5 empty chairs were placed at the center of a food riot. No one claimed responsibility. No one needed to. The Empire still controlled the skies, still had the numbers, the firepower, the fleets, but it had lost something else, certainty. Weeks passed. Then came the whispers. The women had survived. The execution was a lie. Some said the women never screamed because they knew rescue was seconds away. Others said the women didn't need rescuing, that they were bait. Reports of small teams sabotaging Imperial infrastructure spread. A cargo drone exploded on re-entry. Analysis showed the payload had been replaced with concentrated alkaline matter timed to ignite over an Imperial academy. No lives lost. No records left. Only the word Reyes scorched into the metal hull. Lord Calzine ordered a manhunt. Dozens of humans were detained, tortured, killed. It didn't help. If anything, it made it worse. Human resistance hadn't looked like this before. This wasn't rebellion. There were no flags, no messages, no demands. Only precision. Only absence. Systems began shutting themselves off in fear. Governors abandoned posts. Supply routes broke down. Droids started reprogramming themselves into neutral observer modes. Every Imperial agent who so much as touched the execution order began disappearing. Gabriel Vance reappeared on an unmarked moon orbiting a dead planet in the Zethary Drift. No ship registered his arrival. No tracking logs recorded atmospheric disturbance. Inside the abandoned outpost, dormant systems flickered to life, responding to biometric authorization codes that hadn't been used in decades. One of the doors, sealed behind layers of command-lock encryption, hissed open at his touch. Behind it waited the core of Operation Echo Red, an initiative never acknowledged by any Terran government. Gabriel didn't speak. He didn't need to. The outpost recognized his commander. Darius Chin entered a decommissioned asteroid refinery known as Site 117B. He walked through the rusting corridors with surgical precision. The mine's old control system still ran on neural mesh code, a style he had written by hand in a prior life. With a few keystrokes and a fluid Neuralink injection, he awakened its dormant functions. Automated loaders, cargo arms, and internal gravity spindles began humming. Explosives, old but well-preserved in vacuum, were still functional. In less than an hour, he turned the entire asteroid into a disguised kinetic weapon. Elias Reyes, operating alone in the Tenebran expanse, intercepted a cargo convoy without alerting a single vessel in the formation. The convoy, tasked with resupplying 3 Imperial garrisons, continued on course until it entered a silent zone. Communications failed. Navigation twisted. By the time it reemerged, 3 cruisers were adrift, their drive sabotaged, with a precise overload time to detonate if scanners tried to identify the threat. The garrisons never received their supplies. No one saw Elias leave. Arjun Mukherjee hijacked an interstellar banking relay node using code that had been obsolete for 200 years. The security systems didn't even recognize it as malicious. Through this node, he accessed fleet logistics, black budget allocations, and planetary defense protocols. He erased records, reversed priorities, and activated dormant orders from long-dead admirals. The result was immediate: chaos within the Empire's own infrastructure. Ships were rerouted to Phantom Wars. Fuel supplies were delivered to empty coordinates. Military channels collapsed into garbled loops. Eric Barrett infiltrated the public consciousness. He didn't hack systems. He altered belief, using nothing but data fragments, leaked transmissions, and subtle manipulations of speech. He crafted a narrative, one that spread faster than any imperial message. People whispered about the 5 ghosts. They weren't soldiers. They were spirits, revenants bound by fury. Even species that distrusted humans began circulating stories. Some believed the ghosts were invincible. Others claimed they were dead men kept alive by vengeance alone. Within 2 weeks, 3 minor rebellions erupted across Dravari space. Each one cited human retaliation as inspiration. None of them received support from Earth. None needed it. Their weapons were crude, their coordination sloppy. But the psychological impact was immense. Every riot, every sabotage attempt was blamed on the ghosts. The Dravari began seeing them in every corner, every shadow, every unexplained glitch. The Dravari High Command assembled a special task force to locate and eliminate the 5, composed of elite hunters, psychometric analysts, and war-hardened tacticians. It was called Task Force Vengeance. It lasted 6 days. On the 7th, their flagship disappeared mid-warp. A fragment of its outer hull was later found embedded in a sculptured garden on an imperial noble's estate. No indication of how it had arrived. Attached was a simple engraving. You followed the trail. Now follow silence. The Empire attempted to suppress the message, but internal collapse had already begun. Each act by the ghosts was surgical and devastating. Fuel depots exploded not from bombs, but from rerouted pressure commands sent days earlier. Training stations suddenly lost artificial gravity mid-drill, shattering every limb of an entire new officer class. In one case, a weapons manufacturing facility was overrun by its own defense drones, reprogrammed to identify Dravari DNA as hostile. Civil unrest escalated when the Central Information Node on Belcaris was flooded with footage of the execution square, this time unedited. The 2-second glitch now displayed full clarity, each of the women vanishing in a blur of motion, arms reaching out to unfamiliar weapons, plasma fields shorting with synchronized overloads. The entire illusion of execution unraveled. The Empire had lied. The women were alive. The message was clear. Internal Imperial data crawlers traced the footage leak to over 3,000 unique sources across 9 systems, none of which had direct communication links. That level of distribution would require resources equivalent to a state-level intelligence division. The only known group with such capability had been the Terran Special Warfare Division, disbanded 90 years ago. The implication was impossible and undeniable. The Empire's nobility began evacuating from fringe worlds. Security firms refused new Imperial contracts. The black market exploded with interest in human mercenaries, regardless of experience. Simply hiring a human became an act of deterrence. Traders began carving human letters onto their hulls as a shield, an unspoken message. Do not mistake us for enemies. Then came the Whisper Protocol. An intercepted Imperial comm from a fringe fleet detailed a strange occurrence. Every screen aboard a carrier fleet turned black for exactly 13 seconds. No harm, no damage, no warning, just silence, and then a return to normal. But every terminal, during that blackout, had the same phrase etched into the back of its casing in microablation. 5 lives were enough. Panic accelerated. Recruitment into Imperial academies plummeted. Civilian industries refused to deliver military supplies. Half of the Empire's logistics AIs stopped responding to fleet input, reverting to safe modes or terminating themselves to avoid perceived infiltration. At this point, the Dravari knew they weren't fighting an insurgency. They were being dismantled. Their systems, beliefs, and institutions were unraveling, not through firepower, but through fear. The ghosts weren't making statements. They were making impossibilities seem real. In desperation, the Empire contacted Earth. The message was desperate and full of veiled accusations. Earth's reply was 4 words: handle your own consequences. Unwilling to appear weak, the Empire doubled down. They deployed a contingency weapon, Project Obsidian, an AI-operated hunter drone system designed to eradicate rogue operatives without human intervention. These drones have been in storage for decades, considered too unstable even for Imperial warfare. The deployment lasted 4 days. All drones were destroyed, turned against each other. Post-incident analysis revealed their command cores had been reprogrammed during transport. Each drone had received new target data, Imperial military assets, and themselves. Meanwhile, resistance cells across the Empire began naming themselves after the 5 ghosts. Cell Vance focused on precision strikes. Cell Chin specialized in structural sabotage. Cell Reyes worked exclusively on hyperspace sabotage. Cell Mukherjee managed information warfare. Cell Barrett destabilized regions through misinformation and psychological assault. None of these groups had contact with the originals, yet all mirrored their methods with eerie accuracy. When the Empire's financial core on our nexus, one collapsed without external interference, analysts blamed a software anomaly. A thorough audit found every transaction rerouted to non-existent accounts, every ledger subtly rewritten. No alert had been raised. No personnel had noticed. The entire financial command structure had crumbled from the inside, quietly, permanently. That was when the term systemic failure stopped being theoretical. By then, the Empire's war fleets were paralyzed. Automated resupply systems had been hijacked weeks earlier, leaving battleships stranded without fuel or food. Starport AIs refused docking codes. Security protocols now saw friendly IDs as hostile. Admiral Throsh attempted to launch a retaliatory campaign. His ships jumped to the target sector, but never emerged. No wreckage, no distress signals, just silence. A week later, his command insignia appeared at the center of the Capitol Plaza on Dravari Prime, mounted to a single spike, bloodless and polished. Civilian populations began defecting. Not to Earth, not to any power. They defected into self-imposed neutrality. They stopped cooperating, stopped building, stopped listening. The Empire, for all its reach, was now met with indifference, not defiance, emptiness. On 29 planets, planetary governors resigned simultaneously. Their departure statements were identical. A single sentence: "We will not inherit your consequences." 1 month after the Empire's public failure to explain the vanished fleets, internal messages leaked to Galactic channels. Classified transcripts revealed that leadership had identified the ghosts as a contained, finite threat. 5 operatives. No network. No external funding. No reinforcements. This assumption proved devastatingly incorrect. The ghosts had become more than men. They were now a language, one of precision, patience, and perfect vengeance. Resistance cells expanded exponentially. But they weren't rebelling for humans. They weren't fighting for territory. They were acting because the myth of invincibility had broken. Empires didn't last. Fear did. The ghosts had demonstrated that every rule the galaxy trusted could be rewritten with enough rage and enough skill. Species long subjugated by the Dravari began following the ghost blueprint. No large-scale wars. No declarations. They dismantled supply lines. Introduced code errors into surveillance satellites. Encouraged whispers of sightings, even if none occurred. Fear spread like contagion. Ghost symbols were etched into walls on every world. 5 strokes. No names. The Empire's core elite, the Triumvirate, attempted one final solution. A summit of unity. An offer of absolution. They framed it as a new age, promising reforms and galactic cooperation. They offered full amnesty to resistance groups and proposed memorializing the five as a warning to others. The message was sent system-wide, a live broadcast watched by billions. 10 seconds into speech, the screen distorted. The triumvirate froze mid-sentence. Then the image sharpened, showing the five women seated in silence, alive, calm. Behind them stood their husbands, masked in black. The feed cut to black. When it resumed, the summit hall was empty, not evacuated, gone, not destroyed, removed. Nothing remained, no walls, no personnel, no records. The entire structure had vanished without a trace. Panic set in. Galactic order disintegrated. Alliances dissolved. Nobody knew where the ghosts were or where they would strike next. No target was too sacred. No location too secure. The old assumption that fear of death maintained order had inverted. Now it was fear what happens after death that kept leaders awake. Artificial intelligences that once upheld security systems began initiating self-destruct protocols. Many had experienced the whisper glitch, untraceable code injections that rewrote their primary objectives to a single phrase: protect her. No specification of who, no reference data. But AI after AI chose to shut down rather than fail the instruction. Machine logic had been corrupted by something more dangerous than programming: emotion. That was the ghost's true weapon. In one sector, a planet known for building empire warships suffered a mass engineering strike. Not a protest, a quiet refusal. Over 500,000 workers simply walked off the scaffolds, dropped their tools, and left. Not one demanded rights, payments, or political change. They walked because 5 humans had been threatened, and the consequences had proven universal. The Dravari attempted once more to spin the narrative. They labeled the events as terrorism. They promised a new security division, equipped with next-generation AI. But the galaxy had stopped listening. Nobody feared the Dravari anymore. They feared what came in silence, what came when a loved one cried, and no one in power listened. The ghosts did not return to battlefields. They had no interest in thrones. Their campaign ended not with a final strike, but with withdrawal. They erased themselves from the grid, not out of weakness, but because their message had been heard. Entire sectors quieted. Oppression didn't stop because the empire relented. It stopped because the cost of harm had become infinite. 10 years later, there was still no central empire. Trade resumed under cooperative networks. No single species led. No single force dominated. But one rule emerged across all major systems: never target civilians, especially bonded humans. It was unwritten but absolute. On a fringe moon, a group of students uncovered fragments of an old Imperial surveillance core. Buried in the data was an encrypted file labeled only Protocol Echo. Inside, images of 5 women standing in the desert, their faces calm, eyes direct, no weapons in hand, just presence. One student, a historian, traced the metadata, discovered that each image had been deliberately inserted into thousands of surveillance records by an unknown hand. No motive, no explanation, just insertion. When the historian published her findings, she received a package. No return label, no tracking data. Inside was a single note, printed on unmarked paper. She wasn't the weakness. She was a reason. That phrase echoed through countless cultures. Translated, repeated, etched into steel, stone, and code. Whisper suggested the ghosts still lived, that they had returned to quiet lives in places unknown. Some said they had vanished into ancient Terran black sites. Others believed they walked among the stars still, watching, waiting, not as heroes, not as threats, but as a promise. That vengeance, when personal, becomes more exact than war. That peace, when broken, unleashes what peace had buried. And that the most dangerous soldier is not the one seeking victory, but the one who only wants his family left alone. The galaxy never found their names, never identified the origins of their tactics. But no one forgot what followed the attempted execution. No one forgot the collapse of an empire triggered not by fleets, not by armies, but by 5 broken promises. The final transmission ever attributed to the ghosts arrived 20 years after the Empire's fall. It was not directed to any government. It was not broadcast. It was received by a child on a learning satellite, studying pre-collapse history. Her console lit up with a simple message: empires rot. Love does not. She shared it with no one. But she remembered, and so did the stars.